Thanks again for being here, everybody. To PDMIwest, I'm Thomas Hare. I'm the Chief Content Officer of the PDMI. We have to say thank you to our education sponsor, Pacific Media Technologies, for their role in bringing you the content that's here this week. They have a quick video to share.
We trust PMT because we know they're professionals. We've been working with PMT for over 20 years.
They're the most customer-friendly, they're the most timely, the most accurate.
They are really wonderful with their technology and the advancements of their technologies that they implement.
They treat us like we're the only client that they have.
Whatever we need, we know it's going to get done. So that's really important to us, that personal connection.
Pacific Media Technologies. Technology driven, quality guaranteed.
So thanks again to PMT for their support. We appreciate it. We are here today for the Women's Leadership Council and their creation, the Attribution Whisperer. The Women's Leadership Council was launched in January and is our fastest growing, largest council with nearly 70 members now. So it's a tremendous group, and if you are a woman in this industry and you're not involved, please do reach out to myself or Fern. We'd love to have you take part. With no further ado, Fern Lee of Thor Associates, who's the chair of the Women's Council, will take it from here.
So we're excited today. Panels about the Attribution Whisperer. So I'm Fern Lee. I'm the CEO of Thor Associates, a strategic marketing agency dedicated to performance growth in all channels of linear and digital, and customer lifetime acquisition in both the English and Hispanic marketplaces. So I have Michael Weinstein, our first panelist to my left. He's the fractional chief marketing officer of Ideal Living. He also was the CMO of All Star. He's just a fantastic guy. He loves when I say that, but his real main responsibility is maximizing ROI for all channels, including DRTV media, e-commerce, social media, Amazon, and more. Michael's also a musician, having performed and recorded with some of the most renowned musicians worldwide. So thank you for being here. Next we have Danielle Benigni. She's the Vice President and Media Director at TouchPoint Integrated Communications. Danielle is experienced as a cross-channel media specialist, driving holistic strategy and execution, while ensuring all channels and tactics are set up for success from inception to completion, and allows her to bridge the attribution between all tactics. Welcome. And then we have Doug Crouthers. Doug is the Vice President Sales and both global and domestic for Dermawand. Doug has seen the industry evolve over the last 25 years, seeing it from both the marketer side and as well as the agency side. He brings the perspective in his approach to campaign management and growth, and has been fortunate enough to have worked with some of the largest marketers in the industry. And last but not least is Meghan. So Meghan Glenn is the head of media for Flowcode. It's the offline to online company building direct connections between brands and consumers through next generation QR technology. In her role, Meghan works with media properties, agencies, TV networks, and content owners around the world to create instant connections with viewers. So the way I like to do our panels is we're going to hold the questions to the end. We'll have about 10 minutes at the end to come back and forth, but I really believe attribution is such an important part of everything we're doing today. Everything is about attribute, 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 and ROI. So Michael, I'm going to start with you. So in simple terms, what does attribution mean to you, and how does it apply to the business that you're doing currently?
Yeah, so for us, and pretty much for everybody, the goal is to figure out, it's the process of determining what made someone purchase, right? And so that used to be simple. Now with advertising across multiple channels and different devices, it's become difficult. So if you think back to like the old days, Fern, you can attest.
I think he just said I'm old. Did everyone hear that? I think he just said I was old.
So, when we ran a TV commercial, we had a phone number on there. The phone numbers are always unique, as you know, by airing, by station. So it was very easy to determine exactly what creative or what, spot drove a purchase. What's changed, obviously, since then is now with the websites becoming far more of an area where people purchase, and now Amazon and everything else and all the different channels. Anyway, for us, it's critical that we understand where things come from, so we know where to put our money is really what it comes down to. So looking forward to hearing from these guys as well.
So Meghan, let's talk a little. You're a different channel, okay?
Absolutely.
We scan. We can scan to an 800 number. We can scan to a different URL. So talk a little about attribution and what Flowcode is doing and how we can connect.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just piggybacking right off of what Michael just said, we know that the landscape is diversified in a really big way. You have your traditional media that still packs a lot of punch. You know, we still see a lot of traction in areas like broadcast and out of home, but then what about things like social and drone shows and experiential and all of these things that are proven to drive really deep interest and action on behalf of the consumer? And the luxury that we have as a company that, you know, our front door is a very pretty QR code. The luxury that we have is getting to help make every single facet of those trackable. And what we're understanding is that right now when we talk about attribution, it's really a guessing game when it comes to all of these individual pieces, right? Like, what about the pieces that aren't clickable? Are we just going to give credit to, you know, an 8-minute window of traffic spikes on your website? Are we really just going to give credit to Google because we saw site traffic lift in response to an ad campaign? What we're understanding is that it's a lot more nuanced than that, and we also understand that consumers, you know, consumers want what they want. They're very sit forward, and so we kind of have the luxury of being able to tell an attribution story in a different way. When you can make everything clickable, the results story looks a lot different than really just ultimately measuring things like site lift. And so attribution.
So it's interesting. So what percentage do you think of commercials right now are using QR codes and scanning?
50% plus. Okay. You know, we hear often, you know, whether or not they're Flowcodes is a little bit different. We hear that a lot too. We see a lot of kind of inbound and things when we work with agencies. Everybody's like, you know, I hear about Flowcode all the time. Everybody's talking about Flowcode. So we have great share, but kind of more broadly, QR is kind of an incidental front-end offering to a lot of platforms, from e-com to attribution to ad delivery. And so what you see is when you have ubiquitous technology that can virtually fit anywhere and connect somebody directly from the moment of interest to the conversion action, in the equation of trying to figure out what works and rinse and repeat, it ends up being like a really powerful piece. So the share is definitely growing, and about 50% of marketers these days are using QR in some capacity.
And I'm going to hit you one more time. So rinse and repeat. Good, good. So leads to the next question, though. So do most marketers use an 800 number to stay to the 800 number, or do they use a different URL, or do they use the same URL? Because then you can't really attribute it. So how does it look? Is it a mixture?
Yeah, we definitely see a mixture. So thinking about the 800 number specifically, it could be, we see a lot of marketers that kind of have the either or, right? Because we know that consumers across the demographics that you guys are targeting largely are going to have a preference. Some demographics like the 800 numbers, some demographics like the form fill, some prefer to just go to the website. The thing that's amazing is that you could keep it super simple and just have the 800 number and have your Flowcode scan to that number, right? Scan to call. Beautiful, very simple, very seamless.
But now attributing, wait, I'm going to interrupt. But how do we know where that order came from? Did it come from the scan, or did it come from the actual 800 number?
The attribution there, limited, only through the 800 number. But what's a lot of fun is when you kind of have the multi-option situation. So one of the really interesting things is using a tracking URL on the back end of that Flowcode scan. If everything is clickable, you can apply the same logic to that Flowcode scan, a VAS tag, a UTM code. That piece of information will actually show up on the end of saying exactly which channel, which creative actually delivered that end result. Rinse and repeat, right? And then you can kind of take it even a step further, and if you used, you know, our advanced post-scan offering, pops up a page that allows the consumer to either make a phone call, download an app right in place, fill out a form right in place, and then you can kind of better track out, okay, here's the ad delivery, here's the expected goal, and then here's the consumer preference within that. Each of those outfitted with its own unique tracking. And so you kind of end up in a place where you're tracking the exact impression and what the exact response was to that impression.
So Danielle, you work for an integrated media agency. So talk to us a little about other channels. You know, I know that you know inside and out linear TV. What happens in the digital world for you?
Absolutely. So it definitely is. I mean, you're saying some buzzwords that for us are like music to our ears. So all the tracking and those different ways that we can really go ahead and assess the performance for each of those individual channels, give the correct, you know, credit to each of those individual calls to action or the mechanisms in which that somebody's clicking through. And so we're seeing people use, at least from an integrated approach, different QR codes, different calls to action to be able to attribute back and see what actually works and what generates that response and what's actually lifting from each of those individual channels. And I do think when we look at it holistically from a paid media perspective, understanding how each of those channels are folding into that bottom line is really important, and understanding the attribution and the percentage that each of those channels get in terms of credit is really important to understanding the media mix. And I think when we look at it from digital versus social versus TV, how people engage are going to be different, and how those demographics and how those different audiences engage are going to be different. So giving options, we see a lot of people go ahead and give different call to action options for each of those different channels so that we can hopefully try and engage as many different demos as possible based on the brand goals.
And right, it's all about demographics, older versus younger, how they're going to respond. Like, we talked about 800 numbers. I happen to specialize in older market, so when we drive, a QR code, we tend to drive to another 800 number, instead of form fill. So, Doug, let's talk a little about, what do you see? Oh, worst at this. Hold on. Okay, he's going to kill me. Okay. So what do you see as the number one challenge to data capture as it relates to attribution?
Well, I think there's a couple of major challenges that exist besides cookies going away.
We're going to
Yep.
hold that thought. Hold that thought.
You
That's
know,
a question after.
I think when it comes to pixel placements, how you capture the audience as they come to your website, where they go, and how many touches it takes to actually compel someone to make a purchase, you can really get into the paralysis of analysis.
Right.
If you really spend a lot of time, especially when you look at attribution modeling. If you go deep into just Facebook, 7-day attribution, Google, 7-day attribution. Everybody's got this different attribution model if you look at their systems, and unless you're able to pull those together and really get an analysis going that's going to be valuable to your decision making, you're kind of dead in the water. You're really just searching for something that, you're almost stuck going, well, here's my baseline, here's my lift.
Right. That's exactly.
You're back to that old, well, I know I'm here, I just did that, so I'm here. But what if you're doing a lot of that all at once? Then it becomes a lot more difficult for you to kind of aggregate all the information and understand it.
So, Michael, pixels, our favorite word these days. Let's talk a little about that and differential in the placement and how it helps in attribution.
Yeah, that's become a big thing. Just the challenge in general, especially as a marketer, a brand, we face the challenge, first of all, of having multiple agencies sending us reports weekly, and in our internal team sending reports, all looking for credit for orders that, when you add them together, far exceed whatever is actually in the system. Yeah, the math.
Did we have that happen this week? Just want to make sure.
So yeah, we have we're in an age now where you have attribution platforms. Obviously, you have the systems themselves. Facebook has theirs, Google has theirs, WooCommerce, Shopify, and so on. And then you have these third-party platforms, and they all give you these little snippets of code that we place on our site. The challenge there, it's a great thing because now we have multiple opinions and not just relying on one source. But at the same time, too much of this now slows your website down, and you have to balance all these things. So yeah, we're getting better, I think, is what I'm trying to say, at placing pixels so that our agencies can have all the data that they need. We're almost there.
And so, Danielle, what do you think is the number one challenge?
I have to agree that fragmentation is really a big issue for us, and especially when looking at it from a media side of things, kind of pulling in the reporting, that cross-channel reporting, into one holistic view. So you have all of these sources coming in from different platforms, different channels have different sources, and being able to use one platform to really create a strong analysis on really what's contributing to the bottom line goal is really important. And sometimes that's a struggle depending on the size of the agency or the different platforms that are being used.
Perfect.
I want to chime in on that, Fern.
You got it. I'd love for you to chime in on that.
I'm going to say something a little controversial too. So something that's really interesting that we are coming across is, I as it relates to attribution, or more specifically QR as an attribution tool. We hear all the time from Fortune 500s and agencies, I go to one vendor and get a QR code from there, and I have, this pixel from this vendor, and I have, this entirely fragmented, to borrow the term, fragmented approach to audience engagement and how to measure it. And the God's honest truth, I sit here sometimes and I'm like, okay, well, wait 1 minute, because what we see in ad delivery, especially on the programmatic side, the areas that people really want the attribution for, how many times have we as marketers or people that are managing clients come across issues of fraudulent ad delivery or subpar performance? And the question that I always ask is, are you going to put all of your attribution eggs in the same biased baskets that are misfiring when it comes to ad delivery, who actually have something to prove and have something to back up the results story, versus using your tool set as a marketer, building that mosaic to kind of tell the story that you need to tell in terms of results and attribution, but also finding a very unbiased source. And like, shameless plug for Flowcode there, we don't have anything to do with your ad delivery. We want you to be successful, but it's ultimately not up to us. So it's that thing of like really being discerning as marketers of like, are we really tracking the full story? Are we really accepting this margin of error, these discrepancies, and how do we kind of fill those gaps? It seems to be a huge challenge right now.
Absolutely. So Danielle, how can companies effectively integrate offline and online marketing channels into their attribution? It's just a little bit what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I think making sure that we have that tracking in place is really important, whether that's unique identifiers on the brand side, like account numbers, loyalty numbers, like things like that, or if it's going down to the media side of things and the UTMs, the different pixels that are placed, things that we can actually QR codes that we can go ahead and attribute and track. That's, I think, extremely important for us. And being able to pull in some of those actions that are driven for each consumer across whether it's TV or print or digital or social, because to Meghan's point, everything is fragmented, and I do think that there's a lot of misconception about which channels really drive that final result. Whereas there's a lot of different pieces to that puzzle, and being able to create a picture with the first party data that we know is more accurate than maybe some of the third party data that's being pulled in from the different sources that we're leveraging for paid media or for targeting. Being able to take that first party data and attribute it back to the tracking mechanisms that we have in place are going to be more important to be able to say offline contributed X, online contributed X. And then ultimately we were able to deliver X amount of sales, conversions, leads, site visits, whatever that may be.
And we've always heard that, hey, linear TV has always driven, digital sales. Don't know how true that's going to be in the future, but that's all we've heard over the last, 5 to 10 years, especially as digital has become more prevalent. So Doug, give me about how does your company effectively integrate offline and online for attribution?
Well, it's funny because there's, I think years ago, and
Fern would attest.
Are we aging me again?
Yes.
This is going to be the
Well,
prime
I'm
thing?
there with you.
Okay, this is great.
So years ago, with just television, obviously a very easy model to look at. And then even more recently, as Amazon becomes bigger and other offline opportunities become larger, the ability to be able to pull that data in and look at it holistically and as an aggregate, not just, you can look at your TikTok, your Facebook, your Google, and you can look at all television, so on and so forth, and you can see through a QR code that someone touched that, and then they saw it on TikTok. They saw who's converting, right? That's the big question, and then bringing in the fact that Amazon is what 60% of the marketplace. I mean that's huge. And if people aren't pulling that data in to look at their campaigns, it used to be you wouldn't do any of that, right? Even retail was.
Well, you thought it was an extra. It was always an extra.
Like,
it was a plus. It was a plus.
Yeah, that's my gravy. So at this moment in time, the way shoppers interact and the digital experience today is Prime Day, and I'm sure a lot of our customers are out there shopping, but that data becomes even more important because you can't look at a campaign in a silo. Although many of these different mediums are siloed, but you're touching these people in different ways. So you need things like Flowcode, you need the UTMs and the pixels, and you need to be able to bring that data in and compare it, especially if you're using a third-party platform.
Absolutely. All right, so Michael, how do marketers attribute first touch and last touch marketing?
Yeah,
attribution. This is a hard one.
It's also
the biggest
fun
one.
because, right, so like we were saying, for years it was always last touch, that's where the credit went. And it's cool because, back at our company, we are really hammering home the whole thought of it's not attribution, it's contribution, right? We're all playing a role in making this happen. So let's start to look at it that way, and as Doug said, look at it in the aggregate. So what we're doing, and this is really us learning from the systems that we're working with, we're seeing a lot of, for easy math, let's call it like 40% weight towards the first touch, 40% towards the last touch, and then the 20% spread out amongst the middle when there are multiple touches. So that's kind of how we look at it overall. But
Danielle,
yeah, that'll
are your
probably
clients
change.
doing that also? Are they looking at the 40-20-20?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a blend. Some are still, wanting to attribute first versus last and be a clean, line in the sand of which one is contributing to their bottom line. But we really have taken a more multifaceted approach to it lately, looking at that multi-touch attribution, knowing that it does take a few more touch points for somebody to actually move down that funnel. So we're moving in a direction where clients are more accepting of the multi-touch attribution model. But again, things that will continuously evolve, because as we know, as we have more insights and we have more learnings, that's something that's going to have to be refined on a client-by-client basis.
And just to add, a lot of pixels get broken.
Well, that's a common. That's
that's
more pain than I can
that's
imagine.
the most painful part of it, right? Is the pixel gets broken, and now you've got, and we use a post-purchase survey, which is, you can't rely on it, but you can look at it and say, well, that's amazing. YouTube doesn't claim anything. Shopify doesn't even show YouTube coming in, and yet I've got 10 customers this week that said they saw it on YouTube. Now, somewhere in the touch, right, they saw it on YouTube, and then getting down to who converted them. So it can get confusing as well, because you go, wait a minute, like this is working better than I thought it was working, and you just got to. It's just, we're all testers, right? We're in the DR world.
That's
so
exactly right.
test,
Test, right?
And it's
Absolutely.
about bringing like every piece of that media into that kind of optimization space where we've always been able to be so nimble when it comes to digital delivery and all of this. But, the thing that I always think about is 80% of our lives are still spent in the real world. It's inefficient, wildly inefficient to wait for a consumer to find you online via whatever piece of marketing mix, right? They come to you online, and that's the moment that attribution story begins. Like, the part that we're not talking about is like, how do you better track out the pieces like linear, like out of home, like mail, that play a huge part of the puzzle, but realistically have, like, the attribution has only started after they've already made several touches.
Exactly.
And so it's about being able to have these mechanisms that are accurate and factual and not presumptive, not we assume that a bunch of people saw this and that's our attribution model. It's no, people interacted with this, took the action that you wanted them to take, and here is the process of those steps throughout the entire flow. So it's adding a level of granularity and like hard action to that kind of multi-step attribution.
I don't know, it's sounding like a lot of guesswork to me.
Exactly. I mean, it really it kind of takes away a lot of that gray area when it comes to like, okay, well, how did my linear buy actually impact my web sales? It's literally driving a straight line from channel, day part, right down to your actual action. And again, kind of taking out all of the missing space in between.
So Doug, I want to talk to you for a quick second, because you do both. You're one of the few marketers on stage right now. You do international and you do domestic. So how does international play into this? How does it differentiate? Are you looking at the same touch points? Talk a little about that.
It's really funny. So when I started working in the international space 10 years ago, international marketers were 10 years behind the United States.
That's right.
In terms of what they were doing. Quickly catching up, though. I mean, I remember talking to Paul in Australia and him saying, "Oh, the Americans have destroyed the internet." Like we'll never use the internet. It's terrible. Of course, now he's doing primarily, online sales.
Of course.
But a lot of them have really shifted gears, towards the same model that we're doing here in the United States and more attribution. However, still a lot of marketers out there that are very purely DR. That need to have a long form show, that need to have something that works for them. This is their model, right? A lot of them still aren't touching a lot of retail. They may do a lot of online stuff or some online stuff, but they're not really touching retail like here in the United States. So it's quickly evolving, but there's different marketers that process things differently. In some countries, that's the reality is, when I started traveling a lot and visiting a lot of countries, every country is so different, the economies are so different, the way people purchase is different. And even to speak to, you kind of look at this, when we started talking about brand response really years ago, right, where we said really what we're doing is, we're almost back to a David Ogilvy type of, well, it takes 9 times to see this ad before someone reacts. Oh, it takes 5 times. There's a number of times for price points and different types of products that it's going to take. The customers are much more savvy. Like I said, I started in this business in '98. The infomercials were doing 20, 30 to 1. It was insane. But
we're still not doing that.
Good boy, wouldn't that be great? And you could say a lot of things you can't say now. So, but that's just the fact of life.
Those damn lawyers, see that?
Yeah, thank goodness for PDMI fighting for us.
So let's talk a little about cookies. We've always talked about cookies. Michael, talk to me a little about how will digital attribution be affected when cookies go away? We've been threatening that they're going away for 3 years, but so what is your feeling on this?
I'm not overly concerned. First of all, it's in the best interest of all of the platforms and all the channels that we use for it to work. So they all have been working on just different ways. So I think instead of it being cookie-based or attributes-based about a consumer or a visitor, it's going to be more behavioral. And so, again, I like the fact that they're trying to do something to make people more comfortable, even though to me it feels like people are overreacting, and I'd much prefer a good shopping experience. And feel free to track my cookies and not serve me ads for a hairbrush and a hairdryer. But
Had to get back for that elder statesman.
Took a second.
So no, I'm not overly concerned, actually.
Danielle?
I agree. I think behavioral side of things, contextual is going to be big for us, but also I think first-party data is going to be something that we're going to be tapping into a bit more for some clients that might have been hesitant to share some of that first-party data. And then also those walled gardens, they're going to be big. They already are big, Amazon, Google, Meta, but they're going to be even more prevalent, and you're going to see a lot more clutter. So you're going to have to cut through, and then a lot of testing to see new technologies. Are they viable? Do they contribute what we need them to contribute in terms of the bottom line? So I think there's going to be a lot of testing and learning, but to Michael's point, I don't think that it's going to be anything that anybody's going to be completely thrown off by, given the fact that we've had a slow
Why? Because we've been talking about it for the last 3 years? Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Meghan?
I think when iOS, the whole thing
Right.
with iOS happened, right?
Right.
That's the scramble. And that'll always be the scramble.
Yep.
It's privacy laws. I mean, look at the EU. It's
Well, yeah, it's changing.
But that's where we're at, and I'm not overly concerned as well with cookies, and I think primarily people, it's not that big of a deal for them to select a cookie. I agree. I think people want a good shopping experience and be offered products that they might purchase.
Mm-hmm. It's super interesting to see. So that's kind of exactly it. I don't worry about it provided that a brand, has a first-party data strategy. If we're building it all on clean data, ideally it's going to help with the whole attribution side of things anyway. I do think that it's interesting watching people get creative with solutions. Again, we're talking about kind of building these mosaics of understanding how consumers are working through and how to actually collect that first-party data and kind of repeat, rinse and repeat delivering message against that kind of more addressable audience. So I think that first-party data strategy ends up being the absolute core of it. I'd be freaking out if that wasn't part of the equation for everybody I was talking to. But.
Absolutely. All right, so Michael, what CRM or more tech platforms offer the best process and implementation for brands to capture attribution?
Yeah, that's an early question for us. We're still deep in the middle of figuring that out. So, look, we work with a number of companies in our industry right now, names that we've heard forever. We just started testing an attribution platform for TV, which we're optimistic about. But the other thing is we're hearing, the more I speak to people and read, there's a lot of new things coming out as well. So everything isn't necessarily all IP-based and timestamp-based, and that I think that's going to move forward. So yeah, I think there's a lot of best practice players in the room and in this conference, and hopefully a lot more even at the next one.
And hopefully we're going to open the funnel, because to your point, everything was time stamping and IP. Danielle?
Yeah, I think I don't think there's a clear winner necessarily. I think it does depend on the size of the brand that we've been working with. Depending on our clients, they use different platforms. We've seen success. We've seen they've had some struggles internally depending on what's needed for each of those brands and what categories they fall in, the type of data they're trying to capture. But we have seen some some work for some and not others. I think like for CRM, for us at least, a lot of our clients are starting to build out that CRM.
And you're saying
you're
saying internally versus externally?
Externally. So our clients are trying to build it internally.
That's what I'm asking. Yes.
Yes. So trying to see them kind of work through some of those pain points. Has been interesting. We've seen a lot of them use like the Salesforce is our go-to, and a lot of people are relying on that, and the different APIs that can feed into it have been helpful. But like I said, I think a lot of them have best practices, and a lot of them have worked for some, and there's been some pitfalls for others, just depending on what needs are coming from each of the brands and their business model.
So Doug, internal or external? Which do you promote?
Internal right now. We've tested some external platforms. I was getting this I don't know, say argument, debate about driving traffic, and giving us an opportunity to retarget, remarket, and find lookalike audiences, and just really trying to dig into the data. I think that there's something out there, that's probably a lot better than what we have right now. But I see a lot of these platforms. What ends up happening is you're only as good as the setup. So somebody sets up your pixel improperly, it's broken.
And how often does it happen? I mean, I'm hearing that more and more from my clients. It's a constant. It seems like.
Depends on how I think it depends on how your site's built. We had a site that we've just switched over to a themed site with Shopify because it was a coded site.
Right.
And one bracket, one misstep, you put the pixel here instead of there. It just affects all of the tracking opportunities. So, I'm still a Google Analytics guy as well,
Right.
so I always got to get a head check, and check Google Analytics with the UTMs.
And so what do you, I'm agreeing. Right now, GA is the place to go, and it's always our checks and balance. But what happens when you have such big differentials? What do you do? Where do you fall back to?
Yeah, it's, that becomes the nightmare that is my
That's what they're all looking for.
Yeah.
That's what they're all here.
I'm sure you guys are all going through the same thing, where it becomes to the point where your analysis is kind of, you almost have to start over and start looking at things in a different way, and really going back to customer behavioral modeling, and really trying to figure out who your audience is and how you're attracting them, not to throw anything out the window, but to kind of look at this and not forget that the experience that you've got, and if you've got an experienced team, then you're going to have a much more success doing that. But yeah, there's especially when it comes to tracking the different touches, and then looking at and then influencers. You add the influencers in, right? And now you've got all this data coming in.
And do you attribute to them by code? I mean, how do you do it?
We do use codes, but we also use their unique UTMs for the influencers, so that we can track those as well. I want to know the first thing I want to know is are we creating traffic? Right. Are we getting traffic to the site? Second thing I want to know is how do I convert that? Is the quality there, and can I convert that traffic? Then I want to know, can I remarket and retarget them with discounts and things like that? So it's to simplify things, right? But I'm still old school in the sense that I want traffic. I just need traffic, so I can.
But
I can
again,
analyze.
the more touches you have, the more you have a chance to convert.
Right.
That's the bottom
Right.
line. All right, so Megan, what's the secret sauce to attribution oversight? They're all dying. They're waiting for this.
Yes, give it to 'em.
You guys all know I'm just going to sit here and talk about Flowcode. I mean, I really no. So I mean, the truth of the matter is that I was a Flowcode client before I was a Flowcode employee. I worked for Nexstar, and we put our first Flowcode on TV, and we're like, holy crap, it's Google Analytics for TV. Like suddenly I had click metrics for a broadcast audience, and that's kind of where this thought process started. And now we've applied the same methodology to literally everything. And so while everybody has these very unique attribution mosaics that are as unique as their individual media footprints, right? Like everybody's kind of got their own secret mix. I like being the gravy on top because ultimately, it's solving for group viewing situations, right? Like you're watching the Super Bowl, you scan a QR code. we had the Planters Peanuts spot in the Super Bowl this past year, and we're able to see real time, 76% of the people that scanned that code opted into advanced geo, lat long, right on a map. And Planters had that real time, right after the spot aired. And when we want to talk about attribution, and we want to talk about these hard to measure areas, it is important to have the mix. It's important to use your Google Analytics and to have your attribution softwares for broadcast. It's important to have that mix, but then having that direct, that hard piece of data that can lay over the top of everything. I speak from a place of genuine passion about it because we've seen it hyper-local scale, Super Bowl scale, in real time. It complements the existing mixes and makes it so that you can optimize these real-world environments the same way you've optimized everything else. And talking about addressable data capture and how do you make this actionable, this moment of interest, turn it into a moment of intent, and then rinse and repeat. I don't want to say that we're the champions of the day, but I am saying that it's really interesting to see these unexpected solutions like Flowcode come in and be such a power player in the space that is realistically as customizable as people want, but we're like a common thread across all of it, and it's really beautiful to watch.
So Michael, tell us, what's your secret sauce to attribution?
Well, we are starting to, what was your company name again? I didn't get that the first time. Okay.
Don't listen to them.
Remember after today either.
No PR, no PR, go ahead.
No, we, so it's a few things. One, multiple attribution solutions, multiple platforms. Don't rely on one. That's our number one thing. So we are constantly, we'll have Google Analytics, we'll have the actual platforms themselves, Facebook, Shopify, Instagram, so on. And then beyond that, we will also have humans. And that's probably, from us, that's our secret sauce, is too many people are relying just on reports, not actually taking a minute to look at it when it would just stare at you in the face that there's no way this could possibly be real. Let me go back and see, did the pixel break? Did something not get set up properly, or is there some anomaly? So that's it for us. It's multiple systems followed by an oversight of one or a group that's actually got some.
So I'm hearing intuition.
Intuition,
right?
That's what I'm saying.
So we've always thought intuition to be so important, but when you sit there and you talk to your financial people, you talk to your bankers, they don't want to hear about intuition. They want to hear data points. And it's always been, everyone goes, how do you know media so well? And the numbers talk to you. So it's not, and to your point is, how do we make sure that we don't keep over communicating? And, so Danielle, is there ever, do you think there's going to be a single source, of attribution?
I think it's a nice idea, but I don't. And I think, it really does depend on any individual campaign, any individual brand goals. The type of outcome that you're hoping to achieve will require different views of attribution and how each of those channels that are in the mix, whether they be internal or external paid channels, how they all fit in together. So I think in theory, it would be nice to have a single source of truth, but I don't think it'll ever make sense given the way in which technology evolves and how people engage with
and every channel is so different.
Very different.
So I think you have to look at each channel separately.
Absolutely.
While you want to look at the whole, you don't want to be siloed, but you still have to make sure that
absolutely understanding that how they all work together, the customer journey, how they engage with each channel, category, things like that. Yeah.
And Doug, what are your thoughts?
It's like trying to build a utopia, right? I mean, it's just not gonna. There's not going to be a point where I think everyone is comfortable enough to say, I trust this one platform, because everybody's experienced that burn, right? Where you look at the data and then you look at your data and you're like, this just does not make sense at all. And like Michael said, it comes down to the human, like the human element of looking at the data and then looking at the past and then focusing on the future, but really being in the present and seeing what can I learn from what we've done, what can I learn from our consumer data, and then where do we want to take this? That's all going to come from where it won't come from AI.
Right.
It's going to come from us.
You literally stole the AI word right out of my mouth, because as we're talking about the human aspect of it and the human intuition, everybody talks about media buying and creative becoming, kind of all AI powered. And the honest truth is that it's so empowering that there is such a wealth of tools available for each marketer, each brand to kind of be able to tell that story and add the due diligence, that human layer on top. I mean, realistically, it's very empowering. It allows people to make decisions and really get down to the source of truth. So I don't think there's ever going to be one single source of truth, and nor should there be. And it keeps us safe from that AI aspect.
I agree. I agree. And our new buzzword for 2024, AI. Everything's AI.
Keep an eye out for next year's.
All right. So, Michael, take it away. So, what's our game changer? What do we see for 2024 forward that's related to attribution?
Yeah, the big thing I keep seeing everywhere is, I mean, I'll say AI again, but it's also machine learning, right? So now, as I said before, moving away from simple timestamps and this market and this IP address, which has been effective, now allowing some of the machines to take that information and process it with the technologies that we're now seeing in the last year or so. I do think it will be actually an AI machine learning sort of platform that takes us to the next level. Repeating again that there'll be human involvement with that, but I think that combination is probably what we're looking at for 2024.
Meghan, what are your thoughts? What do we see going forward in 2024?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think AI is going to be a really big part of it. I think the aspect that I see it being really interesting is from the personalization aspects. So not only being able to thoughtfully curate an audience, do your media delivery, track out your media delivery, but then also kind of curating that experience specific for that individual user. It obviously is all contingent on, again, this first-party data strategy and like being very thoughtful about it. But you know, I think AI is going to be so interesting in terms of kind of reducing the number of steps, right? So from point A to point Z, and like being able to tell the story holistically, one end to the other. If you're really kind of reimagining the way that you do media delivery and you're retooling it so that it is very one-to-one, the whole attribution story becomes a lot easier, that side of it. So I think that'll make it a lot easier for us in the future.
So Doug, what's your big game changer for 2024?
Well, I can't disagree with that. You know, I think that it's got to evolve to the point where, you know, you're utilizing AI, you know, and I think in terms of attribution, you know, with zero cookies, pixelless, you know, no pixels.
That's going to be interesting.
You know, I think that's going to be the game changer. Is if machine learning can get involved with, obviously all the input comes from us and our customers, right? So you know, we have a lot of the control. It doesn't come out of the blue, but I do think that process of behavior, customer behavior, and AI, and creating a pixelless environment that you're able to track a lot more cleanly and build these audiences off of, I think that's going to be the key.
Danielle, what are you feeling on what's the big game changer for 2024?
Agreeing with everything that you guys are saying. I think the other big thing is the growth of first-party data for us, being able to segment with more concrete or data that is relevant to the brands themselves, not necessarily just the third-party data that's available to us. Right. So the growth of that first-party data, but also all the new technologies that come along with it, with the loss of cookies. I mean, looking at it from a paid media perspective, the way in which people are targeting, we have people coming at us left and right with all these new ideas and how they're going to be targeting consumers, and how they're going to really kind of make the new way of targeting like known, and that's going to be their fresh view now that cookies are gone, but vetting them and understanding really what works is going to be extremely important for us. So merging of the first party data and the new technologies are really going to be important for media.
Absolutely. So you're very fortunate. You have 5 marketers up here who've been here for a long time and in this business. So I want to open this up to questions and answers, so to give you a little time to really dive in. Who's got our first question?
Gave us a lot of good stuff to think about. I want to kind of build on or ask some questions about that kind of touches on some of the stuff that you had. It sounds like you guys, you actually said that the purchase decision process really hasn't changed for direct marketing. Frequency is necessary in order to build response. What do you think, and so number one, do you think that offline media like TV and radio should still be included? And then when you include those, because there's a difficulty in getting people to respond using the measurable response mechanism, they will have a high propensity to go online. Do or should advertisers allocate 100% of the searches on their brand or their product to other channels? Because intuitively, that would make sense, right?
What do you think, Danielle?
So to answer the first part for offline channels being included into media mix, I think it obviously depends on the goals, the budget, the audience that you're trying to reach, but offline definitely has a place when trying to help build that interest, the education, the awareness side of things so that you can fuel the lower funnel tactics. When we're looking at things like attributing credit of search to some of those other channels, I think frequency plays a role, what that channel mix was at that time plays a role, and how that actually attributes. But being able to have a multi-touch attribution model is going to be most important, because I don't think 100% of search volume comes directly from influence of other channels and vice versa. I think that's a problem that we tend to have with more of that last touch attribution model. It seems a little bit too simplistic, that search will get the credit for everything, and then you tend to have to constantly defend the need for some of that upper funnel tactics to really help fuel the amount of consumers that would come in. So I do think that search gets a portion of, or other channels get a portion of the credit that search has contributed to the overall conversions or leads that you're looking to gather, but I don't think that it would get 100%. Because some people who already know brand recognition or already brand loyal will actively search for your brand or your product, depending on where they are in that purchase funnel.
Well, it goes back to everyone goes, so if you put the word try or your in front of it, okay, is that getting credit? No, they're mostly going to the brand name to look it up.
Right.
So.
And it depends, are they a repeat customer?
Right,
are they a
exactly.
new customer? And they could have easily been influenced and it could have jogged their mind, but they might have already known about your brand to begin with. So I think it's having that multi-touch attribution is really going to be most important, understanding what credit search plays in that role, but also not, defending the fact that we do need some of those upper funnel offline channels to really help build that awareness and interest.
And the fact is you're actually building, I've seen this, as you pull back, you see organic doesn't change much, right? So you've got an organic audience. As you build that brand, you have to, this will blow your mind, right? If you shut down all media and didn't do anything for a year, how well would you do online? Mm-hmm. Like, that's a big question, right? Like you have to ask yourself every day is, what portion of my purchases are coming from people that just know me?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it's
exactly.
That was a great question.
One of the best terms in the industry right now is brandformance. I know it's so silly, but I like, if somebody wants to respond to your brand, they should be able to, and like kind of having this silo between branding and performance, where that out-of-home media, the linear media typically tends to fall in that first category. I think the lines are blurring a lot, and then when it comes to paid search and all of this, there is a direct correlation between making more media actionable and a decrease in branded searches coming through, because when somebody can act on a brand when they see it, they aren't Googling you later.
That's right.
It's definitely an interesting one.
Absolutely. So. Next question.
Hey there, it's Long Ellis with Denali TV. General question, it seems like the marketplace is moving towards better data, better attribution. It's a huge data surge in performance marketing, yet in linear television, the advertisers are not in charge of placing their own ads. So broad rotations, daytime, 10 a.m. to 4 p. How is the industry going to address this? Because no matter how good the data is, the performance can vary by 10 times within a broad rotation depending on the client or the advertiser. So what's the solution? I just sort of throw it out there to you.
We're not running a lot of short form, but
yeah, I mean, I think it, again, depends on the audience that you're trying to reach in terms of how you go ahead and secure and purchase the placements in which that you're running. So I think we have to be a little bit more granular in how we're targeting and the placements that we'd be securing depending on the goals of the campaign. But I also think that you're going to see a blend of different formats for TV, so not just the linear side, but also piggybacking that with some of the connected TV and the streaming side of things, so that there is a more digital mindset to it, where it's a little bit more actionable. But I do think that from an efficiency standpoint, some of those broad rotators and being able to kind of be a little bit more nimble with your dollars does kind of help fit linear still into the mix, depending on if you're going national or regional, while still being mindful of the dollars that you have to spend. So I think it depends on what that return will be if you're going in and being as efficient as possible with the rotation that you're buying, while still trying to accompany that with some of the more digitally focused streaming opportunities to kind of offset some of those costs.
Interesting too to see how people are coming up with more creative solutions to tap into those spaces that work. So if they find that a certain day part is great, but they want a little bit more control. We're seeing people that are going in and doing more of these like creative sponsorships and actual like activations that fall into those categories, because now that everything's actionable and they're finding that their audience is very forward in this space, it kind of opens up a little bit more creativity and like how you want to reach them, goes past the spots and dots and kind of gets into more of the kind of meat of content, which I think definitely helps in terms of driving response in a more controlled way.
Other questions? Lucy?
Hi, thanks so much. My name is Lacey Perkins with Casual Precision. And I was just wondering, while you're trying to sort out attribution for the various channels, have you utilized media mix modeling or any type of analysis to sit above your tactical attribution that you're utilizing?
Michael?
Yeah, I mean that's a yes. There's about 8 different models we've been testing. I mean, mostly at the quote-unquote mercy of whatever agency or platform we're working with. We're trusting the experts that are leading this development to provide us with that insight. But yeah, we've used that. I think, again, going back to the attribution, pixeling, and the platforms, they are constantly looking at this, and now it's almost becoming a hybrid, right? So you have that type of modeling mix. You have, again, we're old school for first touch, last touch, and then I'm still going back to Excel spreadsheets and baseline before I hand anything in. So it's in there, yes, and I think you have to look at all of them.
Doug, what are your thoughts?
And well, that's something that, that came up the other day, and that's something we have not done. But it is something that I want to dig into a little bit more deeply. I might even like to talk to you, Michael, about it. Always looking for, the tide that raises all ships. That's at the end of the day. We do work with Flowcode, and we use Flowcode for quite a few things. I love connected television.
Look at her big smile.
I love Did anybody expect less?
I love connected television because it does give you that digital stream, that you can actually track and look at and get the pixel onto the customer. Linear does become much more difficult when it comes to short form specifically. Obviously, with long form, we can look at the lift during that hour and then use the telephone number. And certainly you can try unique URLs, but at the end of the day, people go to Google and type in your brand name. And
that's the problem.
That's what's going to happen.
Going to be.
Yeah, so that's what's going to happen. So, and I always go back to, no matter what you do, you have to look at lift. You've got to take out this idea that all the data is going to solve your problem. And just look at the data, and it's all in front of you. Sometimes you got to pull back the curtain and look at the data and look at what's the lift there. If you've got organic visitors that are buying from you already, are you burying that in what you call the lift, or your MER or your ROAS or whatever new term it is these days? But that's our reality. Right, that's our reality. So.
The other thing that's been interesting that we will do as well is kind of what we call social listening, where you're able to use certain tools and scan the internet for mentions of your product you might not see in any of the platforms. It wasn't a direct link, but then we found a feed on Facebook or some other social platform that everybody's talking about, or something went viral that wasn't a direct click, but now it's told us, kind of like the survey concept you were using, but without having to do that. So that's been mixed in.
Any other questions? Hey, how are you? Good seeing you.
The answer's Flowcode, whatever you're going to say.
Flowcode. Everybody say it together now.
No. Everyone has to follow on LinkedIn. Thor Associates, come on.
Hi guys, great panel, thank you. This is Jeff with Icon, and we do love Flowcode. We use Flowcode with so I can attest. One of the questions I have is around ACR. And that is obviously very advanced space. It's changing daily. There's a lot of partners in the space. There's iSpot, there's TV Squared, Video Amp, Innovate, actually, TV Squared's on Innovate. But they're really sort of leading the charge in terms of third-party providers to access that OEM footprint at the glass, provide that one-to-one measurement from offline to online, kind of the way we do with CTV and maybe your more traditional digital channels. Do you guys have experience with ACR? Curious to hear your thoughts on just, I guess, what are some of the best practices in the space? Who's doing it well? Maybe who's doing it the best? Is there any emerging new news in ACR that folks should be aware of? Because it is I think it's kind of still in its maybe nascency, but also ahead of where more of the traditional sort of regression spike analysis for offline media has been more historically in terms of understanding latency.
I'm going to turn this around and ask you. Are you guys doing anything with it? What are you doing?
Yeah, all of the above. No, we've tested a lot of these partners, so I'm just curious. And we have we have a POV. I think there's some doing things well, others doing things differently, like leveraging set-top box data with the ACR OEM impression log data. But there's some issues with that. So I'm just curious to hear if you guys just
Danielle, are you guys doing anything?
I personally, on my client list, have not done much with it. It is, I know that some of our heavier TV clients have been doing a lot of testing, but not something that I can specifically speak to.
I'm not utilizing it at all myself, so I couldn't speak to it. But I am going to look into it.
Yeah.
You learn something every day.
Absolutely, absolutely. Question back there.
This will be the last one.
Okay. We'll squeeze in one more. Don't tell him.
My question's for Meghan from Flowcode.
Oh.
Flowcode. You mentioned actionable. Display's been actionable for like a really, really long time.
Yeah.
And yet no one clicks. We talked about fraudulent clicks. We all know that's real. Accidental clicks on mobile. The fat finger mistake where you accidentally click an ad. So even the incredibly low click-through rates are a little bit inflated. I think we all know. What is the scan-through rate that you see? I imagine it's something similar to click-through rate that you see on display.
You would
And
be so
how do you
shocked.
fill that gap when it's such a small percentage of people that are scanning? Do you extrapolate, or do you look to third-party cookies? Do you look to pixels? How do you kind of solve that, what I imagine is a very large gap?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. So what I'll tell you is that it's silly. It all comes down to call to action, right? So what I'm going to say is that the variance that we see across mediums and calls to action in terms of like scan through rate is really, really broad. Very low end. Let's say that you just put up a code with a written call to action, right? And that's kind of the bare minimum. You could probably expect like a 0.15% scan through rate is pretty standard. Now, what I will say, longer form content, verbal call to action, oftentimes tying in some kind of an offer, so like scan to receive an offer, scan for a discount, like really that old advertising thing of like when you want the consumer to do something, really tell them what to do and make sure the value exchange is there. When you're checking all of those kind of best practices boxes, we see scan through rates 25, 30%. The highest that I've ever seen was 88% of a viewing audience, and this was a linear audience, by the way, this was broadcast. 88% of the reported viewing audience actually scanned through to participate in a poll. So the thing, it goes back to that idea of like creative placements and like finding opportunities of like, how do you make this meaningful for a consumer? Sometimes it's not scan to get your coupon. Sometimes it's scan to participate, scan to get an AR filter. Like it literally can be anything and the end result is still the same. And so kind of on the front end, that's what I'm saying about like variance across these positions. It really depends on what your message is anyway. But then in terms of, filling the gap, a lot of what we're seeing people do is, for example, utilizing the quote unquote clickable interactive nature of Flowcode to capture first party data at massive scale, right? So in these cases, it would be something like scan to get this coupon, but you have to input your email to get the coupon, right? We see massive conversion rates on that, like 85% of people will put in that information to get that offer. And where that's a big unlock for people is that it opens up a lot of room to create things like lookalike audiences, build out new retargeting audiences, all of these things that kind of help bridge those gaps. Again, it's all about driving toward those activations that are going to make those gaps as small as possible, right? Like being really intentional with that engagement and driving that engagement. But it has multiple benefits that allow you to kind of rinse and repeat or otherwise fill in the spaces that otherwise might not have interacted.
Perfect. Thank you all for coming today. I hope you learned something. I hope you can take away one thing. You guys were great. Great.